Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.8 Adc Tierlist. So for Java content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes this patch, trying to push up some of the middle of the pack marksmen to see a bit more competitive play, maybe see a push into MSI. They also brought Zeri down a bit as she was beginning to cramp up the top of the pro meta. And let's cover the changes. So to begin with, the C tier is going to maintain its position with both Kalista and Varus in it. Both these champions have been struggling for a while within solo queue. Of course, both of them are very pro-joed at the moment. Kalista, a bit more punished within solo queue at the moment. She has a lot of answers which tend to be pretty popular, whereas you don't tend to see them as much within competitive. In Varus's case, he tends to be pretty pro-joed because he has two very strong builds. The lethality and the on-hit both work really nicely. He can work quite well at all points of the game, has great pick potential with his ultimate, can output really nice amounts of DPS. And then, yeah, in Kalista's case, very early game skewed. Great safety net for a support, allows the support to play very aggressive, and then you can pull them back with the ultimate. Has very kind of like, it has a bit more of a reliance on synergies, of course, you tend to see with the likes of Renata. That tends to be a pretty strong one. And yeah, on top of this, very mechanical champion. Tends to be very pro/elite skewed most of the time, and definitely falls within that category at the moment. Moving on, Twisted Fate, of course, still going to be in the C tier. He has been weak since he received his nerfs to kind of push him out of being so prominent in the top lane. He's still a decent top laner, but within the ADC role, he's kind of beginning to fade out at this point. I believe his play rate will just completely fizzle out over the next couple of patches, or at least to a point where it's no longer great having him on the tier list. But yeah, for the moment he's going to sit within the C tier. Definitely nerfed compared to where he used to be. Still a pickable champion, but yeah, you're not going to find a huge amount of success from him unless you put a lot of games into him. Caitlyn, also going to be in the C tier. She's been struggling for a while, hasn't really found her footing this season in general. There has been some kind of like crit variations and lethality variations which have done a bit better than some of her more like standard builds, I guess, but overall it's not enough to really push her up the tier list. But if you are wanting to play Caitlyn, definitely do the research into the builds, find what works within the game, what you enjoy. And yeah, you should be able to find a bit of success, but very gold-hungry champion. You want to be moving this pick around the map, and you tend to not have as much of that coordination within mid-elo, which once again this tier list is kind of focused towards, so she finds herself within the C tier. Ezreal, still struggling with the fact that his itemization isn't in the greatest spot. Definitely sucks that he lost the grudge from last season. The grudge this season just isn't anywhere near as good for him. He did get buffed very early on, but did get nerfed back down. Of course, he is also very hard to play. Very skill shot reliant marksman, bit unique in that aspect. Also still very popular. But yeah, Ezreal not performing too well at the moment. It's going to be within the C tier. Aphelios obviously did really well at the beginning of the season with the lethality changes. Now that you get 1-to-1 on lethality rather than 0.6-to-1, Aphelios was really thriving off that. They nerfed him down. He's been struggling a bit since. Of course, IE getting buffed definitely did help him. He really benefited from that item being a bit better, but still going to be within the C tier. Hard to play champion. Not something I'd recommend within mid-elo. Xayah also bit elite skewed, bit elite into pro skewed. She's beginning to see a bit more pro play again, which is good. She should have been. She is a very safe marksman. Of course, the ultimate gives her a lot of value there. Has very good peel tools with the E as well. Has very good setup because of this. And in general, these are just very pro skewed kind of levers towards the champion. Tends to be relatively decent in the mid game, not so much early skewed, not so much late skewed, but she can function quite well at both stages of the game, especially if you are accelerated at that point of the game. So yeah, going to be within the C tier for the moment though. Smolder also going to be in the C tier. That wraps up our C tier. Smolder of course has been struggling since he got mega nerfed because he was very oppressive and just obnoxious within the game. His execute got hit pretty hard, that no longer scales. The burn still does, the true damage burn, which is maximum health, but the execute now sits at a flat 6.5%. On top of this, he did get buffed more recently. He got a bit more of a crit ratio on the Q, and I believe he received a bit more base armor, but it's not really enough to push him into the B tier. However, he is a viable marksman. if you can scale throughout the game, he still functions really well later on, but does have a really punishing early game. Moving on to the B tier, so our first buff champ was Draven. He's definitely sat more towards the middle of B tier now. I still wouldn't recommend this champion in mid-elo. You only really want to play this champion if you're very confident in your ability to snowball throughout the game, and you have lots of hours on this pick. You don't want to be first timing him or just pulling him out as like a direct counter pick. You want to put the games in, learn the champion, learn the axe throws, and like where they're going to bounce to, as that's like a unique skill in its own. The builds, there are like different varieties of things which you can go. Hubris, if you're really snowballing, can be quite powerful. There are like lethality centered sky variations. There are just crit variations with like essence reaver and stuff. But yeah, pick builds which function within the game. But like, yeah, I wouldn't recommend this champion unless you are very much like confident on the pick and you know that you're going to snowball into like high elo, for example. Definitely elite skewed, middle of the B tier at the moment. Samira probably drops beneath Draven at this point. Samira hasn't really found so much of her footing this season. She definitely did benefit from Collector being quite strong early on, but that got nerfed pretty quickly. Did benefit from IE being buffed, but not so great on the current shield bow. Definitely preferred it when it had AD instead of attack speed on the lifeline shield. On top of this, also very elite skewed, very early game snowball centric, which tends to be an elite skewed mechanic. With Draven being buffed, definitely puts beneath Draven as the less recommendable option, but still a fine pick if you do have confidence in your ability to snowball. Kai'Sa got buffed. She had a 5% AD ratio buff on the Q, which of course translates into more damage when you have the evolve. It didn't really move the needle at all. She is still a solid champion if you are picking the right builds in the right spots. People tend to miss out on this like skill check because that is a very unique skill check on Kai'Sa in its own. Of course, sometimes you do want to go like the AP long range harass poke build. Sometimes you want to play like an assassin when you are running things like the Eclipse, and sometimes you're just going to want to go more standard traditional builds where you are going like the static, the Ginsus, the Nashes, and then you're kind of going down that route. There are different variations and ways you want to play Kai'Sa, but for the most part, she sits within the B tier at the moment. Solid pick. Definitely want to put the games in, learn the builds, and you should find success on the champion. Hui is going to stay within the B tier. He received a 5% AP ratio buff on his passive. The Q1 got taken out. They didn't want that change within the patch note, so that got removed. It does say it within the tooltip, but that is false. They are rectifying that next patch, I believe. But yeah, got a 5% AP ratio buff on the passive. He's still a solid APC ability power carry within the bot lane, but he's a bit more reliant on utility, and you do need to learn the 9 abilities and like how to rotate them within fights. So you are outputting a lot of DPS. You are supporting your team in the means necessary. And for that, I'm going to recommend him as a B tier champion. But if you learn the champion, then yes, you will find a lot more success. He's not an individual carry, so you do have a bit of a reliance, but yeah, still a solid B tier option. Zoe got nerfed this patch. She lost 30 base health. Didn't do a huge amount, but it definitely brings her down from like the top of the B tier towards like the middle of the B tier, probably below Draven. Definitely tends to be more of an elite skew pick. You want her with the likes of enchanters. You tend to like utilize her as like a hyper carry where she can really snowball throughout the game. Has a really strong synergy with Yuumi. That tends to be Yuumi's best pairing for the most part. And yeah, if you can snowball throughout the game and you can like take the fights when you want them with your ultimate, it is a very powerful tool. Allows you to have really strong kiting capabilities and strong DPS output. She's still a solid B tier champion. Yeah, gonna sit towards the bottom of the B tier. Ziggs and Tristana are going to wrap up the B tier. Both these picks are very good sieges. That tends to be what you pick them for. In Tristana's case, I've spoken about it before. Halo Blades and Lethal Tempo tend to be the only 2 keystones you go in the bot lane. You don't really tend to see PTA, and Fleet tends to be more of a mid lane skewed rune. She's still finding a decent amount of success. Has good pairings within the bot lane. You tend to go things like Navori as it really as it amps up your bomb damage and tends to be really nice on this pick. Like rotating your Qs around as well. In Ziggs's case, still a solid AP sieger. If you can like snowball throughout the game, knock down turrets, and just get a lot of gold on funneled to this pick, he can be really obnoxious to play against. However, he isn't quite as consistent as he used to be. You do have to land your skill shots rather than being able to kind of get away with not as consistently hitting them. So he sits within the B tier when he really probably should be a bit higher. But yeah, Ziggs, Tristana going to be wrapping up the B tier. Moving on to the A tier, Vayne is still a great hyper carry option. Well, hyper carry, solo carry option. She has the anti-tank build, the lethal tempo with like Ginsu's, with the likes of like Kraken, Bork, Ginsu, stuff like this, which will work quite nicely into heavy tanky compositions where you can maintain lethal tempo uptime. In other cases, you can of course go like the Fleet Essence Reaver Storm Razor one-shot variation, where you are very much playing for your single target DPS against like squishy comps. Both these builds do have strong viabilities, and yeah, she finds herself in a pretty solid spot in the A tier. Yeah, middle of the A tier. MF, one of the easier to play marksmen. Honestly, if she's in the A tier, she's just not as solid as a pick as, like, I wouldn't recommend playing MF in her current spot. She's definitely not in the strongest spot she's been in for a while. She's still fine. Like, you can still find success. She's easy to play. The lethality build is pretty cookie cutter in most circumstances. One of the easier to play marksmen. But yeah, definitely has had a higher win rate, had more success in the past. She still works on things like the Collector, can work on Hubris if you're snowballing. Of course, Yomu's did get nerfed, so it definitely did hurt that build a lot more. But like Opportunity, Collector, Edge of Night, Schroeder's Grudge, and then like you can kind of like pick and choose what you need throughout the game. And yeah, you can still find success on this pick. She's still a solid A tier option. She just doesn't really scale that well into like high elo, for example. Seraphine is going to get buffed in 14.9, but for 14.8, she's still a A tier pick. You can still find success on this pick. She doesn't do a huge amount of damage, but she definitely has more strengths in her utility outputs. If anything, she's more like a bit of an easier way to pull off. Of course, not as reliant on like many ability rotations, but more just her AoE shielding, her like setup, her E, her ult are very valuable tools for this. Her Q doesn't do a huge amount of damage, but it doesn't need to. You're not as reliant on being like a DPS output. You tend to rely on other people in that space, but yeah, relatively simplistic champion to play. Solid A tier AP enabler, if anything. Sivir, I actually really like Sivir. I think Sivir is a great pick for a lot of people. Of course, she's relatively simplistic to play. She's safe. She can wave clear and like hyper and be like a hyper carry later on into the game. Makes her quite hard to punish in a lot of spaces. Spell Shield is also a very valuable tool to have. There have been some like variations of builds kind of popping up within China and Korea. However, if you do want to just go something simple, of course, like the Storm Razor, not the Storm Razor, the Static Shiv or the Kraken Slayer builds do still work. And then you can go for like some Navori, Phantom, BT, and yeah, just builds like that. All still function quite nicely on Sivir. She has a pretty safe laning phase, relatively easy to play, and scales quite nicely. I would recommend playing Sivir at the moment. Lucian going to be within my A tier. Lucian actually is in a pretty good spot compared to where he usually would be for like someone who tends to be a bit elite skewed. For average play, he's not doing too badly. He has good synergies. Of course, Nami has been changed, and Nami being changed actually did help Lucian for more casual players. The E, sort of the power being moved from the E to the W, helped the people who were originally W maxing when it was cracked to E max before. It is now cracked to W max on Nami, and that did inflate Nami's win rate, thus inflating Lucian's win rate, as they kind of go hand in hand with each other. But he still does have other strong pairings outside of the likes of Nami. He still functions with the likes of Yuumi, even though I wouldn't recommend this champion. I'm not a huge fan of Yuumi. But yeah, Lucian in a solid spot, a good A tier pick. Yasuo tends to be a bit stronger in the ADC role than in the mid lane. I believe I rate Yasuo as a B tier mid laner. Within the ADC role, he is more of an A tier champion. You are still going the likes of the either Bork or Kraken into IE, Shield Bow. Still struggle with like 4 or 5 item, but you can go the likes of Iceborne, Death Stance is being buffed next patch. Not too great this patch. GA still functions as like a nice 5th slot. Very early game skewed champion. You have to run exhaust for the most part. But yeah, he's a solid A tier champion. Works quite nicely against a lot of the marksman picks. Senna has been nerfed a couple of times. No longer like an S plus champion, more of like an A tier pick. Still works quite nicely on the likes of the opportunity lethality variations or opportunity like hybrid crit lethality options. And yeah, solid A tier pick. Bit reliant on synergies. You're not going to get as many souls as ADC, obviously. And yeah, you tend to be a bit more early game skewed. You don't tend to be as strong snowballing into late game as you're just not consistently picking up the souls. Veigar, solid A tier pick. Pretty close to the S tier. Did get buffed on both the Q and the R not too long ago. really helps him in the mid lane. Like, he is borderline S+2 in the mid lane. In the ADC, the bot lane role, ADC is what they're called for this, but yeah, bot lane role. Veigar is still a solid A tier, close to S tier pick. Great AP carry. You do need a bit of setup around you, but like the cage is a very valuable tool, and his overall damage output is very threatening. Karthus is also going to be Karthus is going to be the first champion. Actually, I'll put Jhin. So Jhin is also going to be my A tier. Jhin is in a very good spot now that he's been buffed. They buffed him in a way which really helped his like identity. The Q being a really valuable wave clear tool, and just like kind of allowing him to be a bit safer, play from longer range, as he can clear the wave a bit earlier. Q also enables a bit more burst potential on this champion, and then he had his crit movement speed buffed, which was also very nice for helping him move around team fights and being a bit safer. Both these really helped what Jhin is already strong at, enabling him to be a bit better, like, at what you want to play him for. So I'd honestly recommend Jhin as like an A tier pick. He was previously in the B tier, but yeah, solid A tier, high A tier option at the moment. And then yeah, moving on to the S tier. So Karthus and I'll put up the 3 AP champions here. So Karthus, Aesol, and Swain, all very good in different regards. Karthus actually has a relatively deceptive, like, decent early game. Like, this champion actually has good fighting tools, and a lot of people don't tend to, like, really utilize that from his kit. Of course, his ult is still an incredibly valuable tool, having a global ultimate, which does that much damage, very strong. His build's at a pretty good spot at the moment. You can opt into things like the First Strike. Dark Harvest isn't as recommendable, but still an option. And yeah, picks in a really strong spot. Aesol, probably my hidden OP champion at the moment, has been for a while. I really think Aesol should be played more in the bot lane role. Has great synergies, is really strong on like WQ and the glide in, and you can just output so much damage, especially if your support can hold the enemy down. His tools for like scaling are really powerful, and yeah, like the champion tends to be pretty good at most points in the game and incredibly strong later on. So definitely something I'd recommend at the moment. If you want to enable an AD mid laner, was picking something AP in the bot lane role which can like stall out games, Aesol was a great option here. And then Swain, an incredibly good frontline team fighting mage, has really good synergies with a lot of the items at the moment. Malignance, Rylai, Zonya, Liandry, all so good on this pick at the moment. I really do recommend playing Swain if you are looking for something with good team fighting capabilities. Maybe not solo carry potential, but yeah, good synergies, good team fighting, great frontline drain option. I really do recommend playing Swain at the moment. And then moving on to wrapping up the essay. So we're going to have Twitch, who is in a really good spot at the moment. They are planning on nerfing Twitch in 14.9, but this pick has been strong for like the longest amount of time. Bork, Runens, IE, very standard build, and yeah, performs really nicely at the moment. Next to him, I'm going to put Ashe. Ashe is also in a very solid spot at the moment. Very cookie cutter ADC to play. Spikes really nicely in the likes of Kraken, you can go like Kraken Terminus, Kraken Triforce, and then you can like wrap up the build with things like Phantom, BT, LDR, stuff like that. All work quite nicely on this pick. IE can also function in there. Yeah, just a very good enabler, good, easy champion to play at the moment. Nyla also going to be in the S tier. Nyla is also going to get nerfed next patch, in a very strong spot at the moment. Bit early games, bit like mid early game burst skewed at the okay, she's good across all of the game. Like, Nyla just has a lot of strengths going for her. She does have a lot of burst potential, which is what they are trying to flatten out next patch. But yeah, things like Collector, Navori, Shilbo, BT, LDR can all work quite nice on this champion. You can even skip LDR if you are going like full crit last stock, because her Q has built-in crit to pen ratio, which works really nicely in like that space. Very strong champion at the moment, in a very good spot. And then I'm going to have Kog'Maw, who is also very strong at the moment. They are nerfing Kog'Maw next patch. Probably the best pick going into next patch, with like all the nerfs to surrounding ADCs. But yeah, 14.8 Kog'Maw, still very strong, really good on the likes of Bork, Kraken. I mean, maybe not so much Kraken, but like Bork, Ginsu's, and then like you can go tankier variations. You can still continue to go on hit, like the Terminus, stuff like that. And yeah, Kog'Maw in a really good space at the moment. And then wrapping up the tier list, Jinx is still my S+, like the most popular marksman in the game. It's probably the best in just generalistic terms. She did get hit by Static being nerfed, but she's still in a very strong spot. Static, Kraken Slayer, IE all work really nicely on her. And then you can go standard crit stuff, or you like can add in things like Phantom Dancer, RFC, I've already said BT, LDR, stuff like this can all work quite nicely on her. Of course, you can even go things like GA, Shilbo if you're looking for a bit more defensive later on into the game into heavy assassin comps. And yeah, she's in a great spot at the moment. Good across kind of like all stages of the game. Short ult CD, great snowball potential. Like you can oftentimes get 1 kill on this pick and snowball an entire team fight. And it just gives her so much value. So yeah, Jinx S+ tier at the moment. Yeah, those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.